What's up, everybody? Welcome to another IG Live. I am Hector Luis Alamo, Senior Editor here at Latino Rebels. Today I'm going to be speaking with Aura Vasquez. She's an Afro-Latina Colombian immigrant who's running for LA City Council. Here she is. Let's bring her on. I'll have her introduce herself, as I always do. I like just because, I could Google all the stuff, I can Google everything about her, but let's see what she has how she wants to introduce herself to you guys. Aura!
Hey, ¿cómo estás?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
You were supposed to join us for a TikTok live. What was like a month ago, right? With some other members of
Mo
Community X.
mobilize for immigrants. Yeah. I guess I'm not immigrant. I guess I'm not TikTok worthy just yet. So for all my TikTok friends, go out there and follow me because I'm in TikTok jail.
But yeah, I'm glad to have you on now because I think obviously you're running for LA City Council, and I used to have a podcast, and I became weary of speaking to politicians in an interview because most politicians just come with their talking points, and it doesn't make for a very interesting conversation, which is what I want to have. But I do follow you ever since the Community X Mobilize for Immigrants thing. I've been following your accounts, and you are a very interesting woman with a very interesting background and good ideas for the city of LA, right? So I wanted to bring you on. But first, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody, and then we'll get chatting.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. Thank you for giving me the space. It's interesting that you say you make your remarks about interviewing politicians.
Yeah.
Because I always kind of like when people say, "Oh, you're a politician," because I don't consider myself a politician. I am a community member, a dedicated community member that deeply cares about our community, and we'll get to talk more about who's my community, and that decided to step up to the challenge of the day. And part of my my candidacy and what I want to do is also dismantle a little bit of this idea that we have of who is the people that can lead us. How do they look like? How do they sound like? What do they do? I believe that we need more nurses, more teachers, more people like you and me that understands their struggle, that I have been in the trenches, and that can represent us and represents our values better. But in order for us to do that, we need to really change the system, and for me, that I came at 18 years old, I lived in New York, with my family. I'm from Colombia. We immigrated here in the midst of a very sad time in my country, with the war on drugs in the late 80s and the early 90s. And, coming here to seek for a better future, just like so many immigrants today are trying to do. And you see how we're meeting them right now, right in the border. And I always like to highlight that also is unusual for Afro-Latinos to immigrate legally to this country, because we also have our own racial struggles in Latin America. And if you didn't know this, let me welcome you. We also have our own racism and our own discrimination among ourselves. Being some folks being more lighter skinned, Latinos or Latinas, in having that legacy that post-colonialism, left us. Yeah. So, I am in my mid-40s. I went to school in New York. I went to Lehman. I worked in New York, and I have been a community organizer my whole life. In the past years, something that people maybe in Los Angeles got to know me better was because of my fight against fossil fuels and the fossil fuel industry, and really imagining a new world free of fossil fuels, and helping retire coal gas plants that are so polluting and really exacerbate the climate crisis that we're living today. And yes, it was unusual for somebody that looks like me, or that has my background to be at the forefront of the environmental movement, especially here in California, where it has been viewed as a middle class, white kind of issue. But we are the ones that burden the most effects of climate change and pollution and poverty and all of the other things that, that we deal with. But it was with great honor for me to really kind of dismantle that too, and to say, actually, we are at the forefront of these issues, and therefore we need to be the ones like really fighting for these issues and getting more of the resources that we need and able to do that. So, in 2013, we got the second largest city in the country, Los Angeles, to be coal free and to really head to a future of clean energy, renewable energy. And that was kind of like the second phase of my career, which was, becoming the youngest, the first Afro-Latina, the first immigrant to serve as a board member in the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, which is the largest publicly owned utility in the country. So it's a place with a lot of power, literally power as an electricity power and power as the reach. And for me to come with like very innovative ideas as a commissioner, and with a clear idea that what I wanted for our city was to get our city to 100% renewable energy. And that needed to have the caveat to really benefit first communities of color and communities that are most affected by pollution and by climate change. And we have been successful, and it wasn't an easy task. It was, again, I was the youngest. I was also the first one to get this idea of having office hours. Commissioners or board members or people in government usually don't have a lot of contact with the community. And I really wanted to dismantle that and change that. And I wanted to be accessible. And also I wanted to hear what was people, like ideas and what we could do better in connecting people with the resources that we had. So I have been the only commissioner ever in the history, 100 years of IUD, to have an open door policy and to host, office hours, and I learned a lot, but I'm going to stop there so that we can, continue.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot
conversation.
there. I mean, and you do have like a very long. I mean, you're still young, but you have a very long career in politics and community organizing. When did you come from Colombia? I saw that you were raised on a sugar farm plantation just outside of Cali. When did you come to United States, and what made you get involved in politics?
Yeah, so we came here, my family and I, in the early 90s to New York. I think it was 93 or so. Yeah, it's been a long time, guys. But yeah, we came here in the early 90s. And, I come from, my family have been very involved also back home, and I also come from a very matriarchal home. The women in my family are really amazing. I have, I think we can kind of say the Latinas of all colors, Latine, the women are pretty incredible, holding a lot of things together.
I always say that, with Latinas in power now, it's so natural for me because I grew up in not only in a fatherless home, but my cousins, their dads were gone. Every household that I knew of, most of them, the Latino ones, were run by women, right? Either, my tias, my mom, my grandma's the matriarch of the family. And so it's very natural for me to see, Latinas running the world now, because Latinos are having a moment. But anyways, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and more to come, But yeah, I came from the same kind of background, even though, my family, I grew up with my dad, and my dad was an incredible figure in my life and in my career. My dad, since a very young age, he never went to college. He was an accountant, but he got a technical degree. My mother never graduated from high school. I'm the first one to graduate from college in my family. But they were very, very intentional about our education. And they were very intentional also about letting us know that we had more than most. and that therefore we needed to share the things that we had with others. So, you know, I grew up like with my parents selling empanadas and having parties to raise money, you know, to like after school programs for, you know, children in town. And, you know, before a school year, we will go and give kids, you know, books and things that they needed, you know, so that they could have also a chance. So that was also very, since a very young age, that was kind of like my example, you know. And my dad, you know, again, they were not very sophisticated, you know, but my dad was always like, ay, Aura, pues di algo. ¿Qué piensas de lo que estamos haciendo? You know, say something about what we're doing here. So since I'm very, like, I talk about 6 years old, 7 years old, I was already kind of on my spot, like, okay, well, you know. So I was very kind of nurtured to be, you know, that person. And my grandmother, who I really look up to, and also was a very humble woman, you know, she taught me how to love nature and how to care for our planet. You know, she was a farmer. She was, you know, invested in her farm and with her chickens and, you know, and her pigs and things like that, and baking. So for me, being like, my love to nature and my love to climate action has always come from home. It's home. I'm defending literally my home. This is my family, you know. So for me, it's always been very important, and that's how I feel like that was like the connection of me on how to get, you know, in politics. And then, you know, later in New York, you know, shortly after we got there, we became all undocumented. We became, you know, we didn't have papers. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Woodside, New York, you know, for a really long time. Later on, I went to live in Harlem, 119th and 3rd, you know, was my home for many years, maybe like a decade. And, you know, we were working for immigrants. And after I graduated from college in New York, I went to work for a Congress member. And that's when really I kind of got pissed off. And I was like, there is no fucking way that, you know, that we have a system that, you know, that I know was like, and there are, I mean, you know, I was working for the Congress member when we had like a big influx of Eastern Europeans coming as refugees. And I remember I became so popular in his office because I really care. So people will come saying like, I can't find my green card. I don't know what's happening with my son. I can't find my husband, like literally. And I was just really invested on trying to help, you know, people. And then for me to also see the system, I was like, I'm working for Elliot Engel. You know, he was one of the higher ranking, you know, members of the Democratic Party. He was the chair of the International Relations Committee. And I was like, tell me why immigration reform is not center to the conversation right now. You know, like I couldn't really ripple with that. And that was like the very reason why I left, you know, and I went to work on other issues and learn other issues in, you know, on education and such in New York.
And then you decided to move to LA, I guess, after that time, right? I mean, talk about, you know, you are running for LA City Council in what district again?
District 10.
And that includes what areas of LA?
So District 10, for folks that are watching and are, you know, to get an idea, is from Koreatown. It has the communities of Koreatown all the way to Little Ethiopia. It has Mid City, which is a very mixed, you know, community, to Leimert Park and Crenshaw, which are traditionally Black communities, and everything in between. So we sit in the heart of Los Angeles. We're like in the middle of Los Angeles. And it has a very funny shape. It almost looks like a turkey of sorts, you know, because of the way that they have redistricted our area traditionally. You know, this community has about 60% of the community here are residents, but only 30% of the voters are Latinos. You know, so there's a very interesting discrepancy between who lives here and who gets to vote here. And that has been, of course, very well shaped by redistricting. And I hate to say it because, I mean, we're Democrats here, but gerrymander.
Yeah. So, and talk about some of the, I mean, talk about, what you plan to bring to LA City Council. I mean, the news from outside LA about LA in the past few years has not been good, right? I mean, it's ever since, even before the pandemic struck, people were talking about LA's infamous, homelessness problem. And that kind of seemed to exacerbate during the pandemic. And now, like, the talk about LA, since I live in Vegas, so I get the chance to go to LA a few times a year. A lot of people leaving LA, a lot of people saying it's getting worse in LA. With, you have the fire situation, you have pollution, you have crime, you have all kinds of things now. Corruption scandals, right? Recent corruption scandals in the LA City Council. I mean, so why do you want to become part of LA City Council, and what kind of challenges do you plan on tackling, and how?
Yeah, absolutely. So LA has become increasingly expensive for anyone to live here, not just for working class, but middle class people also can, like, barely making it. Now, we're coming from a post-pandemic era where we are in a soft recession, where we have inflation, we have an election coming up, not just my election, which is in March of 2024, together with presidential primaries, but we're also seeing this all around the country. There is in the country and in the world. It's we're having a global issue, and that is manifesting in a few different ways. The prices of housing here are skyrocketing every day, to the point that we have investors that come to LA, build, and don't rent to anyone because it's just an investment. So that causes a huge discrepancy on rent prices and who can get to rent and who can get to stay in the community where they live. The other issue that you mentioned is homelessness, which is a global, also a national issue, and it's a regional issue as well. We have folks that are experiencing extreme trauma and mental health issues, that were house insecure, and that now are pitching a tent, or maybe we're living in a car and now they don't have a place to go. And of course, we have climate change. And climate change manifests in a lot of different ways for us here in LA. It manifests in gas prices. It manifests in how much money we get to pay for the electrical bill. And, when it gets hot, we use the AC more. And that also costs us more. So my plan for Los Angeles is very simple. It's rooted and centered back into the people that live here, my community. So we need housing that people here can afford. And 1 of every 3 members of my community are housing secure, meaning they're either paying at least 30% or more than 50% on rent. So if you are not writer right now, that a lot of them are on strike, if you work in a hotel, if you are a gardener or a nanny, maybe you have a city job, or if you're making minimum wage, you cannot afford to live alone in this city, because it will take about 108 hours for you to work before you can afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles. So those are the things that I'm interested in planning on tackling, building more sustainable, affordable housing for the people that live here. And the people in my community earn $47,000 a year in an average. So tell me how someone that is making $47,000 a year can afford an apartment that costs $3,400. It's impossible. So we have to get to the root cause of why housing is so expensive, and how we can incentivize more social housing, more affordable housing, and more housing practices where people can also own their own homes. I don't want to be a renter my whole life. I'm a renter, and I want people to have the upper mobility and to eventually also own a home so that they can leave something for their, for their families and for their children. But we're not going to get there with these high prices. The other part to to my plan as a councilwoman is also to bring more services to our in-house, services that are gonna help them get out of the streets, not just get them housed. And I know we have Mayor Bass has been really skilled in putting people in motels and such, but now we need that second phase. We need to get people up to speed so that they can also be part of our society and have an apartment and have a job and have the mental health support that they need so that they can thrive. And the other important part for me is, city council members serve a very simple job. They are supposed to give you the services, the city services that you need. We need more trees. Tree canopy is super important. We need more parks. In my area, in my immediate area, we don't have a single park, not one. In one of the most expensive zip codes in the nation, LA, I don't have a park to go. In the pandemic, it became really evident that this was a real issue, for us to have open space and parks. And we need a city that has services that work for us. You call 311, they don't show up. 311 is like our service that maybe
right.
we have
non-emergency, right?
Trash, things like that. We need more public transit. And people are like very scared of that in a lot of our cities here. We have a very car-centric city, but we need our city to be about people, not about cars.
I mean, I remember I always talk about Anthony Bourdain used to say that, he used to say there's two cities in America. There's New York and there's Chicago. And his idea was that LA was not really a city. It was more like, because it's so, if you've been to LA, it's so sprawled, right? And there's valleys, there's different valleys, and so I mean, is that part of the problem that makes it so hard to govern LA? I know there's also like certain rules that restrict affordable housing, like you can't have certain affordable housing next to this or that. Explain some of those challenges.
There are two policies at the state level that don't allow municipalities to build more affordable housing. So that's been the Coase-Atkins Act that's being repealed right now. People are really organizing around that. Historically, LA was born as this like paradise that they sold to, middle America, the Midwest. There's tons of Midwesters with like the picket fence, mentality. I want my home and I want my white picket fence and I don't want to see big buildings. This is in Manhattan. I mean, so many people have told me this, they're trying to build here. Like we're in New York City. This is in New York City, but that's really costing us a lot in a lot of different ways, including, with our environment. The other piece to LA that is difficult to govern is that in comparison, we are very similar in size to Chicago or to New York. New York has 51 council members in 51 different communities. LA has 15. 1-5. So these people have a lot of power and a lot of access, and they get to decide and do a lot of things because it's only all 15 of them, and they serve about 250,000 people, which is kind of in comparison to other states, it's kind of like what a governor will have in so in some other states. So it is really fascinating for me to live in a city today where we have such a small town mentality. But again, it's designed that way. And one of the policies that I propose and that I support is to enlarging the city council, at least to make it double, and also making at least double up the city council district so that city council members can serve better the community, and also that people representing those communities can be more representative of the community that they live in. And also, I feel like it's going to alleviate this issue that we're having with corruption. And we can kind of dive in those conversations that some city council members had a year ago, 4 city council members were recorded secretly in a conversation talking about redistricting. And it was really sad. It was a really sad moment in our politics to hear, our leaders referring to others the way that they did, including
making racist comments about a black child, right? The adoptive black child of one council member, and also disparaging about indigenous Mexican immigrants and immigrant communities from the Latina leader, the former Latina city council member. And I remember when that happened is that it really discouraged a lot of people on the left, Democratic voters, because it's like, even when especially Democratic Latino voters, it's like, here we go. I'm a Latino, I'm going to vote in a Latina Democratic leader. And we get kind of this kind of scandal that you would expect from a Trump supporter, right? It was pretty discouraging. I mean, what do you say to Democratic voters, heading into the election, like to keep voting blue?
Yeah, I mean, it's discouraging for me, and I was also a delegate, in those days. I was an elected delegate. I was also elected in the executive board, which is like the highest kind of place where you can serve as a Democratic, as a delegate for the Democratic Party. I was a super delegate. And it's really hard and it's really disheartening. But why was I not surprised? Because the system is set up that way. So we're also putting people, and I tell you, as a candidate, I have to navigate some very interesting things, because the system is not set up for somebody honest, for somebody that wants change, for somebody that wants to do something different to win and to govern. It's not. It's not, because there is a whole movement that includes the labor movement, includes grassroots organizations, includes former leaders, kind of making sure that things are kind of working on their favor. Change is not something in politics that is really like welcome, or it's like really something that within the system people don't want change because it's unpredictable. Yeah. So what I say to people today regarding those recordings and regarding, oh man, do I vote again? These people suck. I mean, look, they're corrupt. We have to get very versed in being part of the solution. We cannot continue electing people and pretending that they're going to solve all of our problems. We as a community need to get involved, and we need to get in the mix too. And we also, in the new wave of things, we have to make sure that we create a system, a governmental system, where people more and more have access and have more transparency and more accountability with their leaders. Because, this idea that like, oh, we choose the guy with the suit, the lawyer, this is right. This is like the regular. I mean, until the other day, it was like the white dude, the white person with the suit that is a lawyer or is a businessman. And everybody was like, yeah, we got to dismantle that. We got to change and it's got to start with us, and it's got to start in our hearts. The first revolution is always internal. So we have to start with us.
And I mean, you're one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because it's part of the revolution to have people in power, Afro-Latina, Colombian immigrant, becoming part of the power structure in LA and hopefully in wider America. But I mean, as an Afro-Latina Colombiana, I mean, you have Francia Marquez, right? In Colombia. Yeah. I mean, how do you feel about that, the administration of Petro, right? Gustavo Petro. First leftist president in Colombian history, first Latina vice president. She comes from an environmental justice background, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how does it, I don't know how much you follow politics back home, but Colombia is going through a very tough time still with the violence, with the civil war, you know, the FARC deal, peace deal falling through. I mean, where's Colombia at, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked because Colombia traditionally has been an incredible ally to the US,
Super
you
powerful,
know,
super
and
strong.
also strategically placed geographically in Latin America. I mean, you know, we're in the corner. For those of you that maybe don't know, you know, we were until very recent, Panama was also part of Colombia. So we're like border with Panama, we border with Venezuela, and we're border, you know, Peru, Brazil, and Ecuador. And so we're very strategically placed. Colombia traditionally had a middle center government that has been very aligned with the US. Now, I am a product of the war on drugs. The money that the United States was sending to Colombia for military aid to combat the drug cartels has not worked. And I can tell you as a Colombian person that immigrated here, escaping the violence that that money represents in our country. So I want people to know this because it's so transcendental and historic that Francia, Marquez, and also Petro won because they have really spoken around this issue. We needed money from the US. Absolutely, we welcomed your aid, but we wanted to fix our streets, to build schools, to help our indigenous people come back to their land after they were displaced because of the internal, you know, wars between the drug cartels and others. That's what we needed the money for. Not for the military that ends up really targeting civilians and such. And, you know, in the pandemic, we saw a very incredible uprising of Colombians, and hundreds of young people die in the hands of the military and the police because they were protesting a potential rise on our taxes, on the taxes in Colombia. And people were coming out of a pandemic when people were already struggling. I mean, if in this country we were struggling, and for example, in LA, we lost 40% of our small businesses, imagine what was like in a developing country that didn't have the same safety net that you know that a lot of us have here in this country. So, you know, there was a huge uprising, and I got actually really involved with, you know, Colombian issues and Colombian diaspora issues, and I founded an organization called United for Colombia in to try to alleviate and mutually all of these you know, this issue in Colombia. I think it's remarkable that now we have a president that speaks truth to power, and it wants a different way. It's more in tune with the environment. It wants to stop all of this fossil fuel infrastructure that we have there. With Francia, who has been a Black woman and has really spoken about what it's like for Black Colombians, you know, like, I mean, just to give you a reference, Cali is the second largest Afro-Latino community in Latin America. We in-house a lot, like we are a Black community that is very impoverished and it doesn't have a lot of opportunities, you know. So Petro is quite controversial and people are still getting used to him. But I have a lot of hope that he is going to be exactly what we need for the Colombians that need it. We have an elite problem there too. You know, we have a people that own corporations. That's not Latin American is not excluded from those things. We have a very similar system. It's very rooted in white supremacy and post-colonialism. It happens there too, you know. And I think it's time for like our indigenous folks, Afro-Latinos, women to also have, you know, rights and rights. And I think that that's what they're trying to do. And it's tough. It's growing pains.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, good to bring up the war on drugs, and yeah, Colombia was the, you know, the major partner in the war on drugs in Latin America because, you know, obviously Peru and Colombia are major suppliers, but I'm also like, you know, coca has a very powerful, especially with the campesinos in Colombia, right? So they're trying to get rid of coca, but like there's a a lot of campesinos are being displaced by the eradication. I think until recently, Colombia had the most displaced people in the
Yeah,
world, like outside of Syria or something like that, right?
absolutely, absolutely. And like, for me, that I had to witness as a child, as a young adult, like I came to this country at 18, so I was a teenager witnessing all of that happen. I want to be clear that there wouldn't be a war on drugs, or they wouldn't be supplied if there wasn't a demand. So the war on drugs really should be in this country. The
Yeah. Now I always say
war,
that, like, where are the drugs going and where are the guns coming from? The drugs are going to the United States. The guns are coming from the United States, right? I mean, I'm from, my mom's from Honduras. Like nobody's Honduras doesn't have a drug problem. Honduras does not have a gun problem. America has a drug and gun problem.
I
But
mean, hypothetically, if we were to legalize all drugs, which I don't think is a terrible idea in my opinion, if we
make
were
it a
to
health issue.
legalize it, yeah, I mean, if we were to legalize them, regulate them, create pretty strong, you know, um, facilities and such, like what other maybe European countries have, model after those. I don't know if Colombia will have a drug problem anymore, or like be the exporter of crack cocaine or such, because then the demand will change and also the violence will change, will probably end, because right now a huge issue, for example, with the border with Mexico, and seeing all those cartels. Mexico is going through the same thing that we went through in the 80s, but it's happening now, with them building their own jails and, doing all those things. Like we were first ground, like first responders to that, to all of the drug culture, I think if we were to legalize drugs, I don't know if we would be having this conversation,
Yeah.
because,
Again,
know,
I'm also from Chicago, so like, when they legalize alcohol, you got Al Capone. When you legalize cocaine, you get Pablo Escobar, right? I mean, it's just people don't.
and El Chapo and all of those. And the other thing is that we glorify a lot the narco culture,
I've
so,
heard that there's the younger generation. There's a new young generation in Colombia that glorifies some of it glorifies Escobar, and that's a huge thing. That's a huge controversy
oh yeah,
in Colombia.
I mean, in this country, like when I say some of the first things when I tell people that I'm from Colombia, some of the first things that they say is, oh, you watch Narcos, like, I mean, is Colombia is like number one coffee exporter in the world, bananas and sugar. Like, I mean, there are things that, and now that I'm very in tune with the whole beauty queen thing or anything like that, but Colombia also, I mean, is top 10 most beautiful women in the world. I mean, there's so many other things that we have such an incredible biodiversity. We have some of the most diverse birds in the world. People go to Colombia to bird watch, like watch birds, and things like that. So yeah, that Colombia has so much to offer. And I do have to recognize, like in Colombia, we have a few elected officials. In New York, we have a few elected officials that are Colombian descent. I think we have an assemblywoman and a senator, and the Colombian community in California is very small. It's very tiny, which is another kind of barrier that I have to kind of get through running here, because I am not your usual Latina Chicana, maybe from Mexico or El Salvador. But in my district, there's a lot of other Afro-Latinos. They're Jamaicans. People don't think about Jamaicans as people that are from Latino descent. I mean, they're in America, they're from the islands.
I mean, I'm
Um,
Puerto Rican too, so like Jamaicans are Taínos. I mean, they're the same tribe. It's the same
right.
tribe. But I know you had a hard stop at one, so let everybody know where they can find you on social media and follow and learn more about your campaign for LA City Council.
Absolutely. So this campaign is really about what we make the campaign of. This campaign is about people. This campaign is about renters that are fighting to stay in their homes. This campaign is about moms that work three jobs to maintain to sustain their kids. This campaign is for gardeners, for the writers and the hotel workers and the actors that are in strike. This campaign is for nurses and teachers. This campaign is for undocumented people too. This campaign is for people that are hungry and thirsty for change. This campaign is for you. So I hope that you can join me, and you can find me at auraforthepeople.com and join the movement. Bring your talents. You know, we have a huge, race ahead of us. There's a lot of people running for this seat, but the time for change and for one of us to get to City Hall is now. So I hope that we can get to connect very soon, and I would love to hear people's ideas and, you know, what we can accomplish together. So thank you so much for the time, and thank you so much for letting me share a little bit about who I am and what I want to do in our city.
No, thank you so much for coming on, Latino Rebels, and good luck in your campaign. I'm sure we'll be probably covering it at Latino Rebels, and everybody will be following. Yeah, like I said, it's good to see, you know, Afro-Latina, Colombiana immigrant getting in, you know, getting in places where, you know, historically we've been left out of. But good luck, and you know, I'm sure there's a lot of people in the comments already cheering you on. So good luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and it was such an honor talking to you. Like, I follow you and I see your work, and I was just so stoked when we got to talk and decided to do this live. So big fun. Thank you so much for your work. Keep it up.
Like I said, I don't talk to a lot of politicians because they usually just give me talking points. I knew you were going to be open and honest and have a real conversation with me, so I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll talk very soon.
For sure.
Bye-bye.